Hi, I'm Yolanda Charles. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com.
Hello and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I am John Liebman, founder and first baseman. You know, a lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people over 50 who want to play bass because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com. That's what we're all about. And we get some of our energy and inspiration from young people like Yolanda Charles, who is with us today. I'm so excited. We did an interview. Boy, it was so long ago. Let me just tell the people a little bit about you. You were born in London, and you've played with everyone from Robbie Williams to B.B. King, Eric Clapton, Roger Daltrey, Van Morrison, Mick Jagger, Lulu, Sinead O'Connor, Daryl Hall, Michael Jackson with Jermaine producing. That must have been fun. She has recorded and performed with Squeeze. She's done film soundtracks. She's worked with my favorite film composer, Hans Zimmer. She is an educator, a speaker, a writer. She fronts her own funk fusion band, the Deep Mo, and she is a member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE. Welcome, Yolanda Charles. We are honored to have you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, John. It's lovely to speak with you again. I think it's almost 10 years.
Almost. By the way, when I said honored to have you, there was a U in the honor, in the word honor. Out of respect for you and the way you spell it, and my wife, who's from Canada, who's now got used to pronouncing things. Well, she doesn't pronounce things the way I do, but she's gotten used to the American spelling. We did an interview, you and I, on ForBassPlayersOnly.com that was published November 10th, 2014.
Yes, I thought so. Almost 10 years, yeah.
And I think we hung out in Germany one time at one of the Warwick base camps, and I do remember hearing you play in a pub in London. My wife and I were there. Was that with Federico Malaman?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and Mark King was there, actually. I remember talking to him.
Olai as well on drums, I think, was there. Is
Oh,
that the same?
I thought it was just
Nicholas?
I thought it was just two basses. I don't remember. Anyway, so 2014 for the interview, and then, give or take a year, 2015 for the other times we got together. So anything new?
A lot of new, yes, definitely. I mean, after that, I then joined, as you mentioned, Hans Zimmer's band, and then after that, Squeeze. So I was doing Squeeze and Hans Zimmer at the same time. And so I toured a lot between 2016 and 2019. I was on the road constantly, 5-month tours, 4-month tour, 3-month. So it's quite long. I was able to take my youngest child with me because I was going to be away so often. So she came on tour and she did a 5-month tour at the age of 11, I think she was.
She'll never forget that. That must have been quite an experience for her.
Yeah, she fitted right in. She had her own bunk on the bus, and she was on the bus with the kind of the less rock and roll bus. So there were kind of older people and people with kids, and so it was civilized, but even still musicians. Yeah, she fit right in. So that was a good experience.
Is she musical?
Pardon?
Is she musical at all?
Very. She plays a bit of guitar and piano. She teaches herself. She's not interested in being a performer, but she loves to play and just listen to music. She's a big music fan, but more of a consumer really than a producer of it. But she's happy with that way arrangement, and so am I, because I think our job is such that you choose to do it because you really want to, because it's really challenging. So the challenge of it for me increased at the end of 2019. I got off the road. November, I was in the US with both Hands and Squeeze. 2 tours overlapped. Really quite cool for me because I managed to hop between gigs. I was rehearsing with Hands in LA, and then where were we? Studio City, maybe.
Oh, I used to live in Studio City. Now,
Cool.
I assume that both acts knew about each, knew that you were playing with, each
They
one knew you
all
were playing with the other.
they all help facilitate my hopping the gig, rehearsing with Hans in the daytime and gigging. A couple of times I was able to gig with Squeeze the same day and fly out over to maybe San Francisco or something after rehearsing in LA. It was really crazy. There was only one crossover tour. I was managing to do both because one was off the road and one was on. So I joined with Hans in 2014. I took a year off. 16, we were touring a lot. Then I joined Squeeze in 17. So between 17 and 19, I was able to juggle both tours, and they didn't clash until 2019
Wow.
autumn or fall. And that's when it became this crazy juggling situation of me taking planes, trains, and more automobiles to try and get visas and crazy experiences trying to get a visa to go back to America whilst in. I think we were in Singapore, so I had to fly to Australia to get, all of that kind of strange
Wow.
arrangements. But everybody was really accommodating, and it worked out well.
And you've got to really make sure you're wearing the right hat when you're playing with. Wait, which gig?
Yeah, I mean, Fender. I was with Fender. I still am with Fender, but I use other brands as well. But they were brilliant. I just had double setups with both tours, so I didn't have to worry about it. You didn't have to take my instruments with me on planes and things like that.
Well, not just the gear, but getting your head right into the kind of music that you're playing.
No problem. Session players, we can just at the drop of a hat,
Yeah. So what's keeping you busy these days now?
Well, at the end of 19, I got off the road in November after quite a long tour. Got another job offer. I was going to go back out on tour in 2020. 2020, screwed everyone.
Yeah.
And then I just rethought my life, like a lot of people did, and decided that time's short and I probably should get on with doing my own thing now. So you mentioned the Deep MO. That was the band that I had when we met 9 years ago. That folded, actually, because I couldn't maintain the band. And I got back into session work properly. But 2019, at the end of that, I decided to start up again in 2020. Couldn't do anything in 2020 because we couldn't play, but I was writing with my then guitarist, songwriting kind of partner, I suppose. He did some songwriting with me. I did a lot of it on my own, and a lot of my songs have been sitting on my drive waiting for attention. So it wasn't difficult to just start it up again because I had all the other ideas from my previous band. And then 2021, I found my ideal lineup, which gave me drums, keyboards, and then guitar in 22. I got my ideal guitarist, who's actually turned out to be my co-producer, and going to be co-writer as well in the band because he writes a lot. So I've got two kind of bands running. It's called Project PH, and I have an instrumentals lineup. So that's the fusion band. So we have a fusion band called Project PH Instrumentals, and then we have my band, which is more of the sort of vocals, more like the Deep MO. So it's very busy running two bands at once.
Yeah,
as you can imagine.
Doesn't sound like anything you couldn't handle, though.
Well, sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed because it can be, I'm currently, I don't expect it to stay the same, but I'm currently writing everything. I'm producing with Nick. Thank God I've got Nick to co-produce with because he's got a great ear for that. So I don't need an outside person. It's just all in-house, but in-house songwriting, production, running the band, including the management of it, the on-the-road stuff. I'm also the record label because I put the music out myself, and obviously that involves creating the music that's ready for release, including the mixing and all of that stuff, and then the promotions, which is probably double all of that work because it's so intensive. That's all the social media. I do all of that as well. I do have some help from my agent. I've just acquired an agent, Funk Gurus they're called. Funk Gurus, they also have Gary Granger,
Oh.
and they have Yannick Guzdala as well. So it's turning into a bit of a bass player's magnet for an agent for Europe at the moment, which is great for me to be in the company of these greats. So I'm hoping that things will settle down and I'll get some management eventually and all of that stuff. But at the moment, it's a one-stop shop cottage industry, slowly killing me, but I'm having a great time. So what can I say?
That's great. I think I need to ask some forgiveness from you. I'm pretty sure I probably said the deep mo, so forgive me. The deep
That's okay.
mo.
That's okay.
Does that stand for something? Mo?
It was modus operandi.
Oh, hello.
I whenever have initials, it always means something somewhere. They're never just random. But yeah, MO was, my deep purpose. And Project PH is about balance. That's all. I'm trying to find a balance between my love for soul funk and R&B and fusion, fast, furious funk fusion. And I'm trying to mix the two things together. And so I've separated them into two bands. And we play Ronnie Scott's jazz club every month. We do 2 nights. Oh, there you go, right?
My
Excellent.
son got me this,
I
actually.
love it. Right.
My non-musician son, actually. I
Oh.
said, "Oh, you're going to London? Yeah, there's Ronnie Scott's. You got to." So he just stumbled upon it, went in, and got this T-shirt. But I was there once. I went with my wife. We saw who did we see? Ravi Coltrane.
Nice.
And it was so funny because I'm looking at the menu and they're touting these fine imported whiskeys.
Yeah.
Jack Daniels,
American.
Kentucky and Tennessee, and
Not Scotch whiskey. I'm surprised.
They did have Scotch. I like to drink what I can't get back home, so I had some Scotch in that part of the world. But Coltrane's not really my wife's thing, but she got back at me a couple nights later. We went to one of the London theaters and we saw, what was it, Mamma Mia. So I
there you go.
3 hours of ABBA music. So,
wow, talk about
what I did for them. No, when we first got married, I'm taking her to we saw John McLaughlin, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and she says, no, Kenny Loggins, James Taylor. I said, okay, great.
James Taylor.
So anyway, back to you. I want to ask you about, I mentioned you're an educator. I know you've taught and you've mentored. ForBassPlayersOnly.com is a bass instruction site. And most of the people that I'm attracting, you heard me mention over 50, and most of the students here are men in their 50s, 60s, 70s. We do get some women, but mostly men in that age group. And they're not trying to be professional bass players. They just, they have some time. They want to play some classic rock riffs and some blues shuffles and some walking bass and maybe a little funk R&B, maybe a little slapping once in a while too. But they just want to do it for fun. And a lot of times when you get into your 50s, 60s, 70s, things like arthritis and tendonitis and shoulder pain and those kinds of things creep in. And I'm just saying that to give you a context. It's not like everybody's an invalid, but just to sort of paint a picture of who we're working with here. Mm-hmm. So in that context, what advice do you have for somebody like that who wants to learn to play bass and wants to just do it because they enjoy it? What should they be thinking about? What's important for them to know?
Well, if there are health issues, and actually I have quite a few students myself, and I say the majority are the same demographic you describe, actually. And a couple have had issues with physical issues with their arms. I think that if there is a tendency towards, kind of injury to do with tendons and joints, if that is a thing, then that's one of the things to be mindful of, is that, I don't know if it's a male tendency, but maybe when somebody sees a challenge, they're going to push through it and use this kind of like chutzpah, hey, I'm gonna defeat the beast, kind of thing. That's not the right attitude to have learning an instrument. That's one of the things I do kind of just get the course correction occurs around. Don't force, just be frequent and gentle and pay attention to what your body's telling you. A lot of the time, most people I find actually are not very attuned to their own bodies. They're not attuned to what it's telling them. And I think to be a musician, you have to be, a good musician might not be aware of it, but there's a certain amount of communication that goes on between the instrument and the body. And maybe a good musician who's just done it often enough never thinks about it, but there is going to be this kind of connection. If you're just picking up an instrument casually, maybe you're not thinking about that element of this bone, sinew, tissue, wood, metal, And so you have to be mindful about what your body's telling you. As soon as you feel any pain, as soon as things start to feel a little like tense, put it down, relax, take a breath, come back to it later. Slow the metronome down, slow your click down. You don't have to get up to the speed of the record you're trying to learn too quickly. Always practice at a slow tempo, and regularly, and don't push it too forcefully. That's usually where I start with men who want to learn. They've got so much, so much to know.
Great information. First of all, we all know deep inside that women are smarter than men.
Okay.
And you also reminded me, I did an interview, actually a couple times I interviewed him. There's a doctor named Randy Kurtz, Randall Kurtz. He is a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, and a bass player. And he worked with Megadeth years ago, just trying to get everybody healthy. And I did an interview with him last year. And when you mentioned awareness, that was the biggest thing that he had to say. He says, make sure you're aware of what you're doing. And if you, just like you said, if you find something, take note of that. Don't just brush it off. Yeah. But he said something else interesting, and he cited, I know, Victor Wooten and I think some other people, that sometimes you still want to honor the technique, but you might have to just modify your hand position just a little bit, because we're not all built exactly the same. And sometimes your hand, your fingers, your arms, something like that, you may need to accommodate the way you're holding the bass and the way you're approaching the instrument. So I thought that what you said fit in very well with that. Also, it's good to know that everybody is on the same page in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. I start there with lessons. The first thing I do is watch how people hold instruments. And everything that you do is oriented towards your physicality, so it's different for everybody. So that's paying attention to detail is all, I think, what bass players do. I think that is our secret weapon, our superpower, is that we are the details people. The good bass players are the ones that have understanding about the nuance and the subtlety of the small, tiny incremental changes we make to our touch and our sound that changes the shape and the feel of the whole song. When a bass player understands that, the length of a note, the velocity, as in the dynamics of it, which notes should be long and short, which ones should be loud and quiet, where it's placed in the beat, before and after the downbeat. That element, those 3, we could say 6 elements, are what bass players live. They live there. They don't always live there with a kind of intellectual awareness and a descriptive term. They just do it. But if you're someone like me who's an educator, I'm interested in sharing the information about how to understand what it is you're doing, so that you can actually alter it, deliberately alter it, to make those changes in the song that makes the song sound a little bit more lazy or a little bit ahead of the beat, sometimes a little more accelerated, a bit more lively. Shorten the notes, something happens. Lengthen the notes, something else happens. Place them behind the beat, something else happens. All of that stuff. That's where bass players live. And I think that's a superpower, because if you can have that much control over your time, tone, placement, touch, all of that stuff, you become sought after, because people are like, I don't know what you're doing. It's the same riff that everyone else played, but when you play it, it sounds really cool or great or better or more appropriate. And they don't know what it is. But if you know what you're doing, you know what it is. You just did a few tweaks and suddenly, bang, riff just sits like a beautiful thing.
I can't tell you how much I love everything you just said.
The superpower bass player bit, right?
At first, I wasn't sure if you were talking about bass players versus other instrumentalists, or when you said our superpower, we have the superpower. I didn't know if we went back to the male-female thing. I would just add one thing to that list, though.
Yeah.
Not just the note attack, but the note release. You said long or short, or when you place it, but the actual release itself of the note. I have a word I call crunchiness. We don't want any crunchiness if you're playing, just for example, maybe even a Dixieland thing or a 2-beat thing where there's some space in between notes, and even like a 1-5, boom, 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 boom. Well, you have to release those notes clean, So there's not any crunchiness, any noise, extraneous sound, string ring, any of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that's control over sound. That's tone. I mean, that's something that when I have students early on, no matter how long they've been playing, if I hear any noise, I always ask, so can you just tell me if everything that you were playing was intentional? And then suddenly they might actually realize they weren't really listening to themselves. And then they realize that the A string is always ringing when they play the G. So then they realize they don't have a correct dampening technique. So we then spend some of the lesson working on dampening techniques, muting techniques to stop all of that and get it all clean. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of it. The release, the string ringing, any fret noises that you don't want to have.
I must be a real geek, a bass nerd. I get excited when you talk about things like that, muting technique. Other than the things that you mentioned about what's coming up, is there anything else in the future, or maybe something like I've always wanted to, or someday I'm gonna fill in the blank?
Yeah, I think so. I think I plan to get into more of the kind of community-based stuff. I love kind of helping facilitate, I suppose, people's engagement with music in a really meaningful way, so that they don't have to be musicians, but they can still make music. So what I would really like is to have a kind of center for musicians to perform, professionals, but also people to come and participate in non-professional groups and do things like rhythm classes, movement classes, things like that, but serving the community as opposed to being a sort of mega commercial thing. Because I think that to have a hub, a central focus kind of building, it just creates an energy of positivity and gives musicians and creatives an outlet for their work. And also, people are much more engaged with musicians and artists if they're not too aloof and remote. Once you get to know people in your community, you actually get proper support. We're missing that. We're looking for it online, and I get that, and it serves its purpose. But real engagement with actual people that you've met or that will come to shows and things like that, it doesn't need to be a massive number for you to actually have a decent career, but you just have to be physically present. So that's one way we would do it. We would invite musicians from elsewhere, other towns, and create some kind of a network. That's what I would love to do a bit later, maybe 10 years or so.
You've given that a lot of thought.
Oh, I've got a whole plan. Maybe I'll run out of steam for playing small jazz clubs to 50 people in about 10 years or so. So in the meantime, I'll start to grow my other idea. But right now, I'm going to just focus on playing live for the next decade or so.
Focus is very important, and
yeah.
You have that discipline and that drive.
Oh, yeah.
What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
The last time you asked me this question, I think I said something about a fantasy physicist or something, because it was like, yeah, I love science. But actually, I think if I wasn't a bass player as a professional, I still play bass. But I would never not play bass. But I think I would be a writer, because I've been doing more of that recently. I've almost finished my book. I haven't written looked at it for a while, but it's ready.
It's an autobiography, right?
Yeah. And I've kind of did a huge kind of push and got to 100,000 words and thought, right, I got to stop. And I stopped just before COVID because I thought it'd be good to not include that chapter, because my life changed from that point onwards. And so there really is a new chapter for real. So I've stopped just before then. So I'm going to start releasing it on my Substack very soon. I don't know how many words at a time, but and just stretch it out a bit, because it was a lot of work and I've got a lot of editing to do. But yeah, writing, I love writing. I think it's really satisfying.
Keep me posted. I will want to read it. I will read it.
Cool.
Yeah. Physicist. You just reminded me of high school days. I did very well in biology. I did just fine in chemistry. Something about physics, I don't know. It blew my mind. I remember in 12th grade, the teacher said, okay, now imagine everybody in the whole world is in this one spot and we all jumped up at the same time. What would happen to the earth? And then he starts talking torques and fulcrums and weights, and I don't know. It just, I don't know. I was never going to be a physicist.
Me neither. I actually just like reading science fiction a lot. And I like to think that I understand half of what I read when I read a textbook, but really I'm just fascinated with the magic of it. That's my thing. I like magic. I like the magic of music. I like the magic of what it does to our spirit. And, that's what physics is as well. It's kind of quite fascinating, I think.
Oh, that's great. I'll just leave it to the physicists to get it all figured out.
Right.
It's so great talking to you. I really enjoy. Let's not wait another 9 years before we do it again.
Please, I'm here. Absolutely.
I don't know when I'll get over to England. My wife and I have been there like 5 times. We've been there enough that we know our favorite restaurants and favorite places to eat. There's a place called Nopi in Soho, I think.
Yeah.
And the chef, the owner, is Israeli. What's his name? Otto Langi, something like that.
Okay.
And I couldn't figure out Nopi, and he's from Israel. So I'm taking Hebrew words backwards and inside out and trying to figure out. I asked the waitress, I said, Nopi, what is Nopi? She says, oh, north of Piccadilly.
No. Cool.
It's a great place. He's got a special every night. It never serves the same thing twice. But I digressed. Thank you so much, Yolanda Charles. It's so great getting together with you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon and in person.
That would be fantastic. You've got to come see my band. I think you'd like it.
I would love to. And if you're playing at Ronnie Scott's, I'll enjoy some fine imported whiskeys.
I'll join you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. A lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people over 50 who want to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com. That's what we're all about. I will see you all next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, let's play bass.